Thank you everyone for joining us today on this beautiful sunny LA day. I'm Alex Fierro. I'm a specialist at LA Modern Auctions, but more importantly, I'm on the board of Photographic Arts Council. We're a nonprofit organization that organizes now exhibitions in our lovely new space. This is our third exhibition and our first in-house talk in this room at the Reef. We've loved having our space here, and we're glad that we can utilize it to promote and show different artists' works, including Brandon Tauszik here today. We have Water and Power on view. We are having a discussion here with Brandon and Rosecrans Baldwin. We'll start with brief bios of both people. So we have Rosecrans Baldwin is now an LA local and is best-selling author of Everything Now, which we'll be discussing a bit today, winner of the California Book Award. Other books include The Last Kid on the Left and Paris, I Love You, But You're Bringing Me Down. His debut novel, You Lost Me There, was a New York Times Book Review editor's choice. Rosecrans is a correspondent for GQ and frequent contributor to Travel and Leisure. Other bylines include The Atlantic, National Geographic, and the New York Times. In Hollywood, Rosecrans co-wrote the feature documentary, Stone Locals, directed by Cheyenne Lempe and Mikey Schaefer. You may read more about his credits and find books that prove fun and insightful read to purchase on his website at rosecransbaldwin.com.
Plug.
Sorry, former gallery director as well. So I just have to plug the artists where credit is due. And I don't say that lightly. The books are really a joy to read, so I recommend it. And Brandon Tauszik is the exhibiting artist that we have here in the Photographic Arts Council space today. He's a photographer and filmmaker based in Los Angeles. Tauszik's work examines contemporary American social and environmental issues, frequently taking form as immersive multimedia projects. As you can see, we have not only photography, but also moving images within the room. Just a taste of what he is capable of in his process. His work has been praised by outlets like The Washington Post, Le Monde, the British Journal of Photography, and more. Previous photo book publications by Tauszik include Water and Power, 2024, 15 Vaults, and Pale Blue Dress. He is the recipient of grants from California Humanities and Berkeley Film Foundation to support his film Living Harriet Tubman, as well as Pulitzer Center to support his project Facing Life. Tauszik recently completed a 2-year fellowship with the Starling Lab at Stanford University, where he developed a low-cost way for journalists to preserve their work online. Please check out his portfolios and his documentaries and music videos. I mean, because we are in LA, of course you have to you do super cool music videos.
It can't always be stale. You gotta have fun.
No, but that is, well, we'll get into it later, but that is part of the ecosystem of being an Angelino, and so if you are a filmmaker, I think that's part of the diaspora of being, music videos. So, without further ado, I'm gonna let each of the artists give a brief bio.
Sure, happily. Hi, nice to see everyone. We met at an event, what was it, 2 years ago, I feel like? In
2 years ago, yeah.
And then saw this project, saw the zine, was really blown away. So when Brandon reached out about being here today, I was really excited about this. So the book in reference is this book. It's got an incredibly green cover. It was basically, I spent 3 years, I moved to Los Angeles about 11 years ago. I spent 3 years trying to figure out why on earth I loved it so much and why I felt so at home here, which made no sense to me. But I wasn't really interested in my own version of that, so I spent a couple years just shadowing people around greater Los Angeles to understand what it meant to them. So that was following one woman around for 1.5 years. I realized that came out weird. I was not stalking her. I was learning what her life was like, to spending 24 hours with people, spending a week with people, stuff like that. And then also just reading as much as I could of all of the literature about Los Angeles that has gone into sort of explaining this place, defining this place, just trying to do everything I could to, and I guess we'll get into this, to not be the person who there's been a great history of writers, especially writers from the East Coast, who show up to Los Angeles and tell Los Angeles how to think about Los Angeles. And so knowing that I could easily fall into that trap, I tried to do everything that I could not to avoid that. Everything I could to avoid that.
I feel, well, and that's a great segue to Brandon. I mean, I feel like you definitely, you do have risks a lot in your practice. I mean, there's definitely risks within this room, but we'll get to that. But I don't know if you want to give a brief overview of yourself
Sure.
and the show.
Yeah, so I work a lot in projects. That's how my brain functions, kind of like long-term, in-depth projects. So made maybe between 5 and 10 throughout the course of my life. This one is Water and Power. I made it in 2024. It charts the Los Angeles Aqueduct and all of the hydroelectric plants that are still running along it from here all the way up through the Owens Valley, all the way up to Mono Lake, which is the actual beginning. The aqueduct is sort of what allowed Los Angeles to become Los Angeles. Over 100 years ago, William Mulholland, that whole story. Los Angeles was rapidly expanding at the time into a city, but it had very little power, and we live in a desert. It had no water. So Mulholland and his crew went up through the Owens Valley, bought or stole, depending on how you view it, 90% of the land, which LADWP still owns today, and took all of the melting snowpack from the eastern Sierras that ran down into the valley and sent it here. So this system is still running out there in the desert, kind of rotting away, but still functioning. It's fully green. It hasn't really been updated technologically. The snow melts, it runs down the hill, it powers the plants power the pipes, and that's, it's this sort of self-generating system. It used to provide the vast majority of Los Angeles's water and power, and today it supplies on a given year around 30% of our water and about 3% of our power, just because of the way the city's expanded. What drew me to the project was California's 20-year drought, which essentially ended with our 2 wet winters that we had around 2023. So at that point, I was hearing a lot of like surface level news articles about California's snowpack at 300%, the dams and the hydroelectric systems that were basically dead, Oroville Dam, everything like Deadpool, were full again. So I started looking up some of these systems, and this one, which pertains to where I live, and a lot of the photos that I found of these plants and of the aqueduct were large format black and white from basically when they were built, kind of opening day photos and stuff like that. So that's, I can get more into the access of the project later, but that's why I decided to go and try and make this project and go back into these spaces.
Yeah, it's an amazing project, and I'm glad that that our president Michael Dawson met you and brought your show and your ideas to us. It's been really awesome to exhibit and learn about the work. And getting to know both of you in preparing for this talk, it was interesting. I mean, I'm just meeting you today officially, and I've met Brandon a few times, but it was interesting to come with that perspective of approaching your work, of reading your book and listening to your book, and then also looking through all of your videos and your documentaries. And I was like, wait, what? We have these 2 creative people, and I realized they both actually are almost the same person, just working in different mediums.
My twin.
Twin powers activate. No, but I thought it was really interesting because, like, like fun music videos aside, like even the music videos, everything that you both do, you give this humanistic point of view of the person. And so all of the portraits that you have, I mean, my favorite is the gentleman with the wrench, and you give him this strength and dignity. That's so amazing.
I picked that wrench up. It was very, very, very heavy. And they do use it. It wasn't just for show.
It's like the size of a human being. Like, yeah. But it's amazing because you're both outsiders as well, both not native to Los Angeles, and yet you give perspectives that give a genuine feeling of like, I've been here for 17 years. I'm like, oh, they get it. Like they totally, I mean, of course I'm not from here either. But we're all transplants here in some form or another. It's just a matter of when. So given this, I'd like to ask, someone that's not from LA, how do you guys both approach a new project or subject matter, and how do you bring that genuine perspective to us?
Do you want to start with all the books you read and the research for the book?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I was joking earlier, but it was really grounded in truth. I felt an extraordinary amount of anxiety approaching this project. The idea was moved to Los Angeles about 11 years ago, and noticed two phenomena pretty quickly. One, I felt at home here for the first time in my life. I've lived in a bunch of different places, 3 different countries. It just didn't make any sense. And didn't really have any, I have one cousin here, and 2 friends. And so like, it was just, why would I feel at home here? What is that weird feeling? And then 2, just started spending Saturdays, like day off from work, going out to Azusa, going to somewhere in San Gabriel Valley, going down to San Pedro, and like just doing the Jonathan Gold style, like find a place for lunch, eat lunch, go for an hour-and-a-half walk afterwards. And so just started to, as part of that education, also just start to read everything that I could. So like, you know, Mike Davis was the gateway drug to Linnell George, who was the gateway drug to Octavia Butler, who was the gateway drug. It just like kept following those paths. And then when I would be at a dinner party or I would be out with a friend and I would have had too much to drink, I would say something really stupid, which is like, dude, LA is not just like any other city. It's different. And this became a pet theory of mine, again, somewhat semi-drunk, of that Los Angeles, though I began to really believe it, was something different than other big cities in the United States. And my pet theory was that there is this model called the city-state, which is how the world's civilizations were effectively organized before about the mid-19th century. And prior to that, obviously, kingdoms and empires, et cetera. But you get people glomming on to an area, natural resources, multiple languages, but they've got something of mutual interest, whether it's trade or defense, et cetera. In LA, just after a while, not just Los Angeles, the city, but LA County, the 5 counties, greater Los Angeles, I didn't understand why if you roll down Vermont all the way to Long Beach, it's just like Instagram. It's just forever, Or you go to Ventura and you're like, am I still in LA somehow? Like it smells the same, I don't know, feels the same. Anyway, so the point is, I just started reading as much as I can, because if I was gonna write about this with this theory of mine, I was like, and I was joking before, but there is a tradition of people from choose any other city than LA who show up and someone picks up the tab and they stay at the Chateau Marmont and they talk to their Uber driver and they talk to the waiter and they go home 3 days later and they're like, this is Los Angeles. And you're like, fuck off. Like that's fine. That's your little weird tweaky thing. But like, I was just like, this is not a book about me. It's a book about everybody else that I can find, whether it's the literature of LA, the people that I met along the way, et cetera. I mean, when you're photographing other people, do you feel that on your shoulders? Do you feel like the weight or responsibility?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And approaching this project, I like to do a little bit of research when I'm beginning a project, not too much to like, you just have to go experience things.
Yeah.
But, I read books like Cadillac Desert and, did a lot of research with the archives, looking in the city archives to what had been photographed, those 120-year-old photos. I think, though, to your point, Alex, not being from a place can give you agency to be curious in a way that one might not be if one is from a place. So like, I'm still fascinated by so many things, as I'm sure Rosecrans is, and as I'm sure you are, that you see every day in this city. And it's just, this was one of them. And to be able to explore it and to photograph it and to share it is just such a joy and an honor.
Yeah. Yeah. And so with both of your projects, what were some roadblocks or hurdles? Especially with the Water and Power show, I can imagine, there's like locations where I'm like, how did you find that? How did you like physically get there? There's clearly a road, but I know you can't just get off the 10, take the 10 to the 101 to the 5, and then you just take the exit. Like how?
Yeah, that was deep in the desert. I shot this over the course of the summer of 2024, and the Owens Valley gets to be like 100 plus degrees.
So hot.
And I was just out there by myself. I don't have 4-wheel drive. I actually I climbed up that pipe. That pipe is about maybe like 20, 30 feet in diameter, and it goes down a mountain and then up. And I really shouldn't have done that in hindsight. If I fell, like there's just no one there. But you know, the larger project, which was self-published as a zine, which is unfortunately sold out, but there's a couple over there if you want to flip through. You know, obviously I had to distill the body of work for this gallery, but the larger project has a lot of interiors and people in the plants themselves. So when I had the idea for this project, I like to send a lot of emails. I send so many emails every day. I kind of like it. So when I hear something interesting or I read something interesting and it's, oh, maybe that project, I'll do like, 20 minutes of research, send an email. So I emailed DWP's comms people when I was hearing those articles about the 300% capacity snowpack, not expecting to hear back. I said, it was a white lie. I said, freelance visual journalist here in LA. I want to do a Washington Post climate story on the LA Aqueduct inside all the plants. And then a week later, they said, okay. And I was like, oh no. So I emailed Washington Post climate editor and they said, no, thank you. So I was like, shit. So I
Does that help give you access, by the way? Because if you say, I mean, we have artists in the room, photographers and journalists, but if you say I'm an artist working on this project, I feel like it's just tougher. Immediate no.
Yeah, because they're comms people. They want things published and they want favorable things published, and that's sort of their motivating factor. So, which is why I kind of name dropped a large publication, but made a mistake there. So then I pitched the science editor at the New York Times. They wanted it, but then a higher up killed it. So it was about a 9-month process of finding a publication, which eventually I did. Distillations magazine out of the Science History Institute. They said, yes, let's do this. So that was great because that gave me access, and that also gave me, a small budget to, this is hotel rooms. This is way up in the Owens Valley, multiple, throughout the course of the summer. So at that point, I got access, and the whole time they were like, we really don't do this. Like, we don't let people in here, even journalists. Like, this is critical public infrastructure. So I had to sell them on the, the archival, and they haven't really been photographed. And so when
did you do like a lot of research in advance prior to trying to sell them on this project, or was it kind of concurrent?
Kind of concurrent. I mean, I was just sending very short emails. I wasn't, soapboxing to them. But yeah, the archival were sort of an inspiration for me. I kind of photographed this much more formally than I usually would, kind of harking back to some of those images, which you can all see. They're in the LA City archive online. They're really beautiful.
And your video that you just made as well, there was a really great comparison side by side of like piping interior from, what year was that from?
Like 1910.
1910. And Brandon says, I saw this image, and so I went there, and it looks the same. And then you just see it colorized, but it's
yeah, again, like a lot of these plants just have not changed at all. But yeah, they gave me access begrudgingly, and I had a minder everywhere I went, not for these exteriors, but every plant all the way up through the Owens Valley. A DWP, Bowen was his name, shout outs Bowen. He traveled up with me, stayed at hotels, and
wow.
And everywhere I went, he was like, don't photograph that, do photograph that. You're gonna die if you move your arm 1 inch to the left because there's a turbine there and you're too focused on photography. So, yeah.
Wow, that's really cool. I mean, I'm just curious, like logistically, how did you arrange for lighting and the practicality of capturing these portraits? I mean, especially the gentleman with the wrench, like it looks like beautiful studio lighting, but you're probably like literally in a
The wrench
warehouse.
One's interesting. He's in the bottom of Power Plant 2 in the basement, and that's just like a manhole hole in the roof of the basement.
So
I was just like, can you
architecture.
just stand right there? And so that's how that worked out. But I had lighting, I had flash. These spaces are very large, so it needed a lot of fill and.
Right. And Rosecrans, I mean, how did you approach the architecture of your book? And I'm just curious, like also, like emailing LADWP, I don't even know how, I can't even get a person to talk about my bill, let alone, can I go to this mountain and see this 20-foot tall pipe? But like, you met, if you read this book, you literally have met every person or type of person in Los Angeles, from the budding starlet to a gambler to just everyone. Like, so how did you go about doing that?
Yeah, it was literally the gambit of being like, who's the most interesting person and see where that leads. But much more than that, I think, had to do with sort of the approach and the intention, which was, I'm going to be super transparent with you, and I'm going to tell you, this is my project, this is what I'm working on, and here's what I come from, and this is what I want to do. And it was so much about, I mean, it was about 3.5 years in the making. So it was a lot of just gaining trust, because I was asking people to share stories that are not my stories. So why on earth would they trust me to be the one to represent that story or tell that story? Never mind, why would they trust me enough to introduce me to someone that has not heard me at all? And so if I did anything right, it's that I enabled that trust. And everyone that's in the book, I did share the passages about them or that contain them with them prior to publication and be like, did I get this right? It was just part of the fact-checking process. And thankfully it all came back very positively. So that's been really, just feels good. I can sleep at night, because there's some parts of the books that get quite gnarly with certain people that are going through some extreme suffering, whether it's in Skid Row or it's in a group that I spent a week with that could be accused of certain things that might be manipulative, but I'm not really legally allowed to talk to in detail in public. But in any case, it's in the book.
But it's their truth, right? Like,
yeah.
That's part of the process is whether it's the wonderful, like, this woman is at Sundance and her dreams are about to come true, and then they don't, or they do.
Right.
And then people on Skid Row, it's like, we see it every day. And so, but
yeah.
you give like a really humanistic, like a really kind, like, I don't know, it's just a kind point of view to everyone. It's the all truth that you show.
I don't think, I mean, even people that are engaging in sort of criminalistic or criminal or I am very open-minded, open-hearted. There was also lots of stories that did not end up in the book. Like, I think one example I was relating to you earlier is I went out quite a drive to meet these two women. I can only say so much about this, which for reasons will become obvious in a second, but I was there to interview them about some experiences that they'd gone through, and they had really worked very hard as activists to achieve a big goal for their neighborhood. But as a consequence of that, they had been threatened and then attacked by members of their neighborhood who didn't like the attention that was coming on the neighborhood by virtue of the activism. And so they're telling me the story, and I'm like, oh, this is an extraordinary story. We're having coffee, and we're an hour and a half in, and then one of these people said to me, they're like, well, you can't use this for the book. And I was like, oh, because we're in witness protection. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I can't. That's wild. So there was just like, but stories would happen where you're just meeting people, and it's just, it's too bad. But I mean, that's an amazing thing about Greater Los Angeles. It's just, the world is here, and there are so many stories on the ground for artists, for photographers, for writers. It's just gold all over the place if you're curious and interested in people, share things with you.
Yeah. I mean, and you've experienced that, and I saw your film documenting, I can't remember the group, but
Union del Barrio.
Yeah, and the ICE agents and how dangerous that is. But at the same time, it's necessary that someone does it, and you wind up being that person, that brave person to document that and be in the nitty-gritty of that. You guys should definitely check that video out on his website.
It's called A City Fights Back. It's at The Intercept.
That's like a whole other, I mean, that could be a whole talk in itself. I mean, it's really powerful. But yeah, I mean, now that we know you both better, I mean, it was funny when I was researching you both, I saw the film that you did with photographer Jim Goldberg, which I encourage you to look into his work, but he's known to interview people like that are in a retirement home or what have you, and take their portrait, and then the sitter actually writes in their hand on the photograph their story. And we realized you guys combined our like Jim Goldberg, and I thought like, oh, you guys should do a project together sometime.
Yeah, let's do it.
Sounds great.
Okay.
Wonder Twin powers activated, good. Well, they're going to be around for the party portion of the evening. But thank you everyone for coming, and thank you for coming to talk. This has been such fun.